Welcome back. We've been on this kind of long and roundabout journey trying to understand the role of the arts in Christian salvation. And we're almost at a part where all this stuff comes together, but not quite, so bear with me here. I'm trying to fit all of these into short, 4 or 5 minute videos, and so far I've gone over just about every time, and this one is going to go way over, so my apologies in advance. I just can't figure out how to cram all this stuff into one short episode, so I'm just going to let it go long. But we talked about life the way God intended. We saw that there was the breath of God making people alive. Adam was just a lump of dirt. God breathed life into him. There was intimacy with God. Adam and Eve had this really deep, intimate relationship with the Lord, face to face. There were human communities, human relationships, and human intimacy. There was work that was fulfilling to us. And then there was the physical world that God put us in to give us pleasure. And God even says, as part of the physical world, he made the trees to be pleasing to the eye. And this is how I defined beauty: pleasure for the eyes. And in Hebrew, it's the word chamad, this deep desire, deep pleasure. Well, turn the page, and all of this starts to crumble. Adam and Eve are hanging out. The serpent shows up, and he tempts Eve. He talks directly to Eve here. Did God hold out on you? Is there something that God said you can't have here? And that's just because God doesn't want you to become like him. Try it. Taste it. It's great. Well, Eve saw that this fruit was desirable for wisdom. And that word desirable, to be desired for wisdom, is the word chamad. So this pleasure, this desire, was not sin. God put it there, and he didn't put sin in the garden. He put chamad there, and chamad is dangerous. And he knew that this could lead to sin, but he'd put it there anyway because he wanted that badly for us to experience that deep pleasure. But this desire did prompt Eve. It didn't cause her to sin, but it kind of gave her the opportunity. She saw that this was desirable to make one wise, and so she ate the fruit. Where was Adam during all this? Well, standing right next to her. She ate the fruit, she took a bite, and then handed it to Adam and said, "Here, taste this." Adam ate the fruit. They realize they're naked. They cover themselves with fig leaves. The devil walks away laughing. And here comes God. He shows up, and he says, "Where are you?" And he tracks them down and says, "Wait, did you eat that fruit that I told you not to eat?" And he's talking right to Adam. So he says to Adam, "I told you not to eat that fruit. Did you eat that fruit that I told you not to eat?" What is Adam's reply? Well, yes, but the woman who you put here, she made me do it, right? She gave the fruit to me, I ate. So yes, Adam says, I did eat the fruit, but ultimately it's her fault. And really, ultimately, it's your fault, God. I was just happy sitting on the couch watching hockey with you, and she comes along, and look what happens. Look where we are. So think about what's happened here. God told Adam very clearly, if you eat the fruit of this tree, you will die. And in Hebrew, it's literally, you will die the death. And I don't think Adam understood what death was. I mean, he's in Eden. There is no sin. There is no death. He had never experienced it, his own or anybody else's. So he didn't really quite get what death was. I'm certain God explained it to him, but there's no experiential understanding of what death is. But if somebody says to you, don't do this, if you do this, you will die the death, even if you don't know what death is, you know that's bad. You don't want it. So God said to Adam, did you eat the fruit that I told you not to eat? And Adam said, well, I did, but she gave it to me. In other words, yes, I did, but it's her fault. She should die the death. Make her die, not me. Now, imagine being Eve, and this person who you have the most intimate possible relationship with in a perfect world where there's no sin, complete, utter trust, vulnerability, everything. And he turns and says, make you die. You should die, not me. Right? Every bit of trust that Eve had in Adam is gone. Within one generation, one of their children kills another one of their children. Cain kills his brother Abel. There's murder. Human relationships crumble right away. God said, as a result of this thing, as a result of eating this fruit, disobeying me, I will make the food you eat come by the sweat of your brow, which tells us two things. One, work, which was supposed to fulfill us, became toil. Work became unfulfilling, drudgery at best, extremely difficult. We dread Monday mornings. The alarm goes off, and we just say, oh, shoot me now, because of this fall, right? Because Adam and Eve ate the fruit, and that got passed on to us. Work fell apart as something that was supposed to make us whole and fulfilled. The physical world started to fall apart. That's the other thing that we learned by this. The fields just won't produce crops the way God designed it to. The work we do is much harder, and it's to be avoided. It's just bad. It's not whole. It's not making us whole or complete. And it happened that way because the physical world starts falling to pieces. We start seeing later in the scripture the famines, earthquakes, there are natural disasters. The book of Romans starts out telling us that all of creation groans because of sin. Sin affected the whole physical world. All these things are falling apart. And in chapter 4 of Genesis, we get this one little passage. We meet this guy, Lamech, and he had 2 wives. So instead of husband and wife in this deep, intimate relationship, men start to dominate over women, and they're seen more as property. So you have Lamech and then the 2 wives. And he starts bragging to his wives. Cain killed Abel, and God said to Cain, you have to be banished, but if anyone harms you, I'll avenge you 7-fold, which means a whole lot. It's like the 7 is a symbol of perfection. And Lamech then says, so this young guy, he insulted me, so I killed him. And if Cain will be avenged 7-fold, I'll be avenged 70-fold. And we see a progression of sin here. God said to Adam, did you do this thing that I told you not to do? Adam said, yes, but it's her fault, and ultimately your fault. Then, the next generation, Cain kills Abel. God shows up in person, face to face, by the way, which I've been told can't happen. God can't be in the presence of sin, but there he is. He shows up after Cain kills Abel and says, where's your brother? And Cain just denies any knowledge of this. I have no idea. Am I my brother's keeper? I don't know what you're talking about. By Lamech, he said, I've killed a man and I'm proud of it. That's essentially what he's saying. So, yes, I've sinned, but it's somebody else's fault. To, I don't know what you're talking about, just denial of anything. And then, not only do you claim it, but you're proud of it. And this is the progression that sin takes. And after this, we see this little verse that we usually kind of read right over and don't think much about. At that point, man began to call upon the name of the Lord. Well, I used to read this and think, well, that's great. They're finally getting their act together. But that's not actually what it means. Adam and Eve sinned. God showed up face to face and confronted them about it. Cain murdered Abel. God showed up face to face and confronted them about it. By the time Lamech killed the guy and bragged about it to his wives, there's no mention anymore of God. The people aren't involved with God anymore. And at that time, man began to call upon the name of the Lord, not because they're repenting and turning back to the Lord. It's because God isn't there face to face with them anymore. They've just lost that intimacy with God. So intimacy with God is lost. The human relationships have crumbled. Work is just toil now. The physical world is falling to pieces. And finally, did Adam and Eve die? Well, the Greek worldview, which permeates us in the Western culture, says that there's a separation between spirit and flesh, between the physical world and the spiritual world. And Adam would have died a spiritual death, not a physical death. But where's Adam? Right? He's not here. He's dead. He died. And God didn't lace that fruit with arsenic so that when Adam took a bite, he just fell right over. But Adam lived to be 900 and whatever it was, 36 years, whatever the number is, 900 something years old. My alarm. All right, to be continued. All right, I'm back. So Adam lived to be 930 years old, but then he died. And what happens to us when we die? Our bodies fall to the ground, and very literally, we turn back to dirt. Our bodies decompose. The breath of God that made this lump of dirt into a living human being left Adam's body, and Adam turned back to dust. And that's all of our fate from that moment on. So sin destroyed all of these things that God intended to be fulfilling for us, to make life whole and complete. We've lost the breath of God. We've lost the intimacy we had with God. Human relationships are destroyed and start to crumble. The work that God wants us doing is no longer making us whole and complete and fulfilling us. And the physical world is crumbling and falling to pieces. And the chamad, this pleasure that God put here for our benefit to make us whole and complete, turned into something that it wasn't intended to be. God later on says, thou shalt not chamad, thou shalt not covet. And this pleasure or desire that was a good thing, dangerous but good, that turned into something sinful. And that word chamad is used both positively and negatively through the rest of the Hebrew Bible. So it's not that chamad is now sinful, it's that we use chamad for sin instead of using it the way God intended. But all these things, the whole physical world crumbled to pieces. And what do we do with that now? Right? We're doomed, pretty much is the way the Bible lays this out for us, until God calls Abraham. And in the next video, I'll rush through the whole rest of what we would call the Old Testament and get up to Jesus, and that's where we'll really start to understand how the arts play a vital role in Christian salvation.